All right, good morning, everyone. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to get set up. For those of you I haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Genevieve Judge, and I serve as the Public Information Officer for the Sarasota Police Department. We do appreciate all of our media partners joining us this morning for this important investigation. This morning, I'm joined by Chief Bernadette DePino and Captain Jonathan Todd with our Criminal Investigations Division. They'll be discussing the arrest of Henry Lee Porter, Sr. He was arrested last week following a lengthy investigation into accusations of sexual abuse. Porter is being held at the Sarasota County Jail this morning on no bond on charges of sexual battery on a child under the age of 12. Now, just as a reminder, this does remain an active and ongoing investigation, so we'll do our best to answer any questions you have. Just keep that in mind following Chief DePino and Captain Todd speaking with you all. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief DePino.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bernadette DePino. I'm the police chief for the city of Sarasota, and I want to tell you about a case that our investigators have been working on for quite some time, and we brought some resolution to this case. On January the 2nd of 2020, Henry Lee Porter was arrested in the city of Sarasota pursuant to this investigation. Members of the Sarasota Police Department Criminal Investigation Division had secured an arrest warrant for Mr. Porter, charging him with capital sexual battery on a victim under the age of 12. The victim alleges that Henry Porter began sexually abusing the boy in 1989 while the victim's parents went out of state for an extended hospital visit. This abuse went on for several years while the boy was a member of the church and a student at the elementary school that is run at the church. During the course of the investigation, detectives had interviewed 10 other men who testified that Mr. Porter had molested them in an almost identical manner as the victim in this case. The victims ranged from the age of 12 to 19 years of age at the time of the alleged offenses. These crimes span nearly 30 years. However, due to a statute of limitations and the restrictions attached to that, we are only able to charge Mr. Porter with the current case at this time. This investigation is active and ongoing, but we do believe that there are other victims that are in our community. And we anticipate that after the media covers this story and the information gets out, that there's a potential for more victims to come forward. And we would like to encourage them to please come forward and contact our investigators. The investigator in this case would be Jeff Birdwell, and his telephone number is 941-263-6028. And we encourage any victims or anyone that has any information related to this case to please come forward, even if you think it is the tiniest bit of information that will be able to help allow us to get additional information in this case to bring some resolution to the victims, and we want them to come forward. We do have our victim advocate, Jude Castro, available to help the individuals in these cases. The victims will be provided with support through various resources that we have in partnership in our community to help, from social services to counseling, and Jude will be able to connect the victims to those resources. And they're quite extensive in our community. We're quite fortunate. Jude Castro's telephone number is 941-263-6021. I'm really proud of the efforts of the men and women of the Sarasota Police Department and our regional allies that helped with this investigation. It's been quite a sensitive case and one that's quite significant because it deals with abuse of young children. And I'm very proud that our investigators worked so hard and diligently and with integrity to bring this individual to justice. And I'd like to specifically thank our investigator, Jeff Birdwell, Detective Megan Buck, 3 retired SPD detectives who have been working on this case for many years before they retired, Lynn Thompson, Dave Grant, and John Schultz. I'd like to give a shout out to the FBI for their cooperation and our partnership with them and our task force dealing with child abuse and investigative cases. And I'd also like to thank our state's attorney's office under the leadership of Ed Brodsky for their cooperation in this case. I'm going to turn this over to Captain Todd to give a few remarks about this case.
Well, just to reiterate what the chief had just said, it's been a long time coming, but finally some justice hopefully has been served here. I think a big debt of gratitude goes out to the victims that came forward in this case. As you can imagine, these folks, their lives have been turned upside down from ages early as 11. And these men have gone on to raise families and start careers and try to hide these scars. So to come forward and bear these wounds and have them reopened, it's a big step for them, and this case couldn't have been made without them, so I want to thank them as well. Then I'll open it up for any questions that you may have.
Captain, why weren't these charges brought about earlier? We saw that there were cases that were open as early as the 90s and the early 2000s.
Okay.
At this time, we were able to have a victim that would come forward and testify. And up until this case, we didn't have evidence to be able to bring any charges forward and take it to the state's attorney's office to provide charges. So we were able to have a victim come forward, testify to exactly what happened. Up until then, we weren't able to tie the whole case together.
How did he keep it quiet for so long? I mean, what did he do to the victims to keep them from telling?
Again, it's an ongoing investigation. All of that will come out at the trial.
What does this have to say to the community? Because just from talking to people out there in the streets, we have heard that this had kind of been a rumor that was going around. And if you hear these rumors, this is something that should have come to the forefront a while ago.
Well, it's again, there's a difference between rumors, facts, and then evidence being able to take to a jury and to a trial. And we needed to have facts and evidence, and we do in this case. It's a solid case, and I feel confident that we'll be able to bring justice to the victims. And just to reiterate to the courage of the victims in these cases to be able to come forward and share some of the most devastating things that could happen to a young child or an individual in these type of cases. And I'm proud of them, and we're going to provide all the resources we can to help them be able to move forward. And but that's the reason why, while there was rumors, no one was willing to come forward and give credible testimony.
In investigation 201 and 202, there were 20 young men or some individuals came forward with incidents they had. So since 201 and 202, there hasn't been one individual in the last 20 years been able to come until it was put out on Facebook by the man in Miami?
That's correct.
And what, could you tell us a little bit about those investigations in 1990 and 201?
I can't. I wasn't here then.
How about the FBI investigation?
I can't speak to that either.
What would you like to say to other victims that may be out there? Because with some of these victims, the statute of limitations did run out, and time is still ticking to the initial.
It is. It's very important. Even if the statute of limitations has run out in their cases, it's important to bring credibility to all the victims. We also can provide them with resources to be able to help them to be able to deal with what they've been dealing with and also validate what they experienced. So we encourage people to please come forward, and you never know the information that they may be able to provide. One may help us even more in this case or in future cases, because there are other things that we're investigating in this case that the information they have can help us bring additional charges. But we also, again, care about them and making sure they get the resources and that they need to be able to help them move forward in these cases. And listen, this is not easy for victims of sexual battery, for rape, for sexual assault, especially child abuse when you're dealing with children. It's not easy for people to come forward and talk about it. It's very personal, it's very intimate, it's very painful, and to be able to come forward takes a lot of, and it's not even a courage that any of us could even understand. To be able to come forward and talk and reveal things that have happened to them in the past, especially to somebody that they trusted and someone in the community that they felt was someone that they could go to and to trust. And that's why this is such a disturbing case. It's one that's so troubling. It's one that our police department never stopped investigating and continued up until this day. And we're very grateful that we were able to get an individual who came forward and shared what happened to them, and that it met the criteria to be able to take to the state's attorney's office and bring charges.
Has this been an ongoing investigation since when?
Since the very first allegations came forward. So the investigation from years ago, when the very first allegations came forward, so there's been a constant investigation, and then it gets shelved until we were able to get information, and at this time, we were able to move forward with this
And
case.
that came from the information placed on Facebook.
Well, that was just one piece of the puzzle. I can tell you, since Mr. Porter's arrest, we've had 4 additional victims, so that's a total of 14 since we
The
were.
first one was from the Facebook.
Yes, yeah.
What's the status of the church right now?
The church is still active. In 2016, Henry Porter Sr. Turned over leadership of the church and the school to his son, Henry Porter Jr. We do have information gleaned through interviews that Mr. Porter Sr. is still active and even held service in the church as recently as 2 months ago.
Should be anybody concerned going to the church now?
We can't tie one thing to the other at this point. What we can do is ask people to come forward if they have been victims themselves. We have no other evidence other than what we provided today. As again, it's still active and ongoing. And if anyone feels like they have been violated or any crimes been committed against them, that they should come forward and tell us about it.
You know, he is still active in the church. It's obviously run by his family members. Are they being cooperative with this investigation at all?
I'm not going to talk about anything specific about the investigation because it still is active.
Are we looking at anybody else, crime spanning 3 decades? Do we think anybody else was helping him or maybe partaking in some of these risks?
That is part of the investigation that we're working on.
What is the statute of limitations in this particular case? Like, what's the time span?
Well, there is none now because there's been some changes in the law since the 70s, obviously several changes in statute of limitations. This case is a capital felony, so there is no statute of limitations. At the time, the laws were a little different regarding custodial relationships between the suspects and the victims. So we've been in close communication with the state attorney's office to verify that over time those laws have changed and become a lot more restrictive in the levels of felonies.
I know that in first appearance, the state was saying that they're possibly looking at instances back to the 1970s. I know Chief DePino referenced back to 1989. So is this a 30-year investigation, or are we talking a 40-plus year possible time period in which these crimes occurred?
I would say at least 30 years, and like the chief said, it's still a very active investigation. Again, we've had victims as recently as this weekend reach out to the detectives, 4 in fact, since Mr. Porter's been arrested. So we fully expect other potential victims to come forward, and it could go even further than 30 years.
So that brings the victim count right now up to 15 recently.
Well, we got 1 chargeable victim, and other similar fact victims that have come forward. Yes.
And then I guess one last question for me. Do we think this abuse was happening as late as, say, now or up until his arrest?
I think that's going to get a little too detailed in the current investigation. It's still very dynamic and very active. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to answer that.
You know, obviously, this is something that the police department has been investigating for a number of years now. Was there any steps put in place to try to protect people at that church during this investigation?
What steps are you talking about?
I don't know. You know, obviously, it's something that you kind of knew about, but you couldn't arrest him. So is there anything else that could have been done to try to protect children out there?
There's a lot of times when in law enforcement that we try to give crime prevention information. For instance, lock up your cars, but we still have people that leave their car doors unlocked. And in this case, children are educated at the schools and at home and with their parents. And the one thing I will encourage people to do is to make sure they have open dialogue with their kids. I want to make sure that no one feels that the victims or other people that are associated with the families are being blamed for any of this. To even begin to say that what could the police have done to stop this is, it's a church. You just can't just go in and make accusations against individuals that have a standing in an organization or in a community without having facts. And I'm very proud of our investigators who were able to gather the facts that were needed in this case. And now that it's been brought to light, what I'll encourage families to do is to have discussions with their family members and their children that may have an association with the church in the past and with any organization, and encourage our young people to feel confident to speak forward if they feel like someone that they trust is hurting them, and to, again, encourage them that it's not right to keep secrets from your family and your parents, and to take someone and trust your family to tell them if somebody ever threatens them in any way, whether it's emotional threat or physical threat, and that their families are not going to be harmed. And I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but that's what some abusers do. Is and they also do things like encourage people to have a close relationship with them and build trust as a friend. So there's emotions that get involved, and it's very important to teach our young people to have a confidence in themselves that it's not okay for someone to touch you. It's not okay for someone to treat you any way sexually that you don't feel comfortable with. It's not okay to engage in sexual activities with you, and to share that openly with young children. And it's very tough to tell you what age that you should start teaching your kids, but anytime that you can start talking to your children about things like stranger danger, and make sure you look both ways when you cross the street, is the time that you need to have conversations with your loved ones about cases like this. This is a troubling case for our organization, I think for our community, for our detectives to see that this type of behavior was going on. And it's troubling that it's with a trusted individual who should not have been doing what they were doing. And I think it's scary for our community. Luckily, it's very few and far between. It's not not reflective of what goes on in our community or in other churches. So it would be unfair to blanket everybody.
There's been reports that some of the victims that he had victims were are now have gone on and victimized others.
Are you saying that there's allegations out there?
Well, there have been reports that his victims in the past are now molesting others.
If we find evidence of that, we will bring those people to justice, the same as we're doing in this case. And if anybody knows of any cases like that, I encourage them to please come forward, and we will continue to investigate to find out if that's happening.
Individuals that are doing time now or at the church?
I don't know anything about that because I'm just talking about this case right now, but we could talk about that later if you would like to. If there's no other questions, again, I want to thank our detectives, investigators. Thank you all very much for your time. Please keep all the families and the victims in your thoughts and prayers. And again, I encourage victims, please come forward. We have resources here to help you, and I think it's important for you to help us further this case. And thank you very much.